In the previous video, we covered some primitive JavaScript data types, which include the number and also the string. We're now going to look at some more primitive data types available in JavaScript. This is going to be a Boolean, the null value, and also undefined. Make sure you head into the current lessons folder, which is number 7, and the data types, Boolean, null, and undefined. I already have this open and also open up in the browser too. So when playing around with code like this, we have something available for testing called the console log. In between the script tags, what we need to do is to type in console.log and then open up the brackets just like this. We briefly worked in the console earlier, and this log will allow us to output a certain value to the console inside the browser. So for example, we can say is 10 greater than 5, and if we save this and then right click and inspect to open up the developer tools, click on the console tab, refresh, this returns the value of true. So the console log will output any value inside this console, and it's great for testing and quickly finding out the result or the value. We also have another operator, which is the less than. Save this, and this will be the opposite, which is false. These true and false values are the data type of Boolean. With Booleans, a true and a false is the only two outcomes, so it's really useful for checking things just like this. For example, in the Speedy Chef project, which we have coming up, we're going to have a variable called game started. Before the game has started, this Boolean will be set to be false, and then when we start the game, we reassigned this variable to be true. This allows us at any point in the game to be able to check if the game has started and have certain features available. So for example, we would have something like this. We could set up a variable, and we can give us any name such as game started. Set this equal, initially to be false, and then inside of our console log, first of all, we can check the data type of this variable using the type of property. Refresh, and we see Boolean just inside of here. Okay, so how can we use this in a real situation? Well, Boolean values are often used together with an if statement. So an if statement looks like this. We'll have the if keyword, open up the brackets just like this, and then open up some curly braces. Now you will see this pattern followed a lot inside of JavaScript. We have a certain keyword, we have some round brackets, and then we have some curly braces where we want to run our code. So you will see this a lot as we progress through the course. But in particular for this if statement, what we're going to do, we're going to check if something is true or false. In our case, we want to check if game started is equal to true or false. So what we do, we pass this inside of here, and if this results to true, the code inside of here will then run. In my case, I'm just going to put in a simple console log with the text of game started. So now if we save this, then refresh the browser, we don't see anything inside the console because this is not true. However, let's flip this over to be true, refresh, and our console log has now run. Of course, we will cover if statements in more detail soon, but this is how they can work with a simple Boolean value. But if we have also a second variable for our player name, say let player name is equal to Chris, and then we change our if statement to check this player name. So we have a player name set. We're going to log to the console the message of username is set. So let's just take a step back and think about what we're doing here. We're checking, first of all, last time we were checking if the game started is equal to true. So this was a simple Boolean value. However though, for this player name, this is equal to a string. So do you think this will result to true or false? Well, let's save this and check this in the browser, and we'll see that this runs inside the console. Well, the reason we see this inside the console is because generally an if statement or a Boolean will result to true if a value exists. Here we have a value of Chris, so this definitely exists. So let's see what happens if we remove this name and leave this as an empty string. Save and refresh. So now this must be resulting in false. One thing to note here that having an empty value such as our empty string, just like this, should not be confused with not having a value at all. A variable without a value is another primitive data type called undefined. If we have no value at all assigned to this variable, and if we were to remove this string just like this, and then instead we'll do a console log for the player name, and we'll also remove this if statement, just so we can run this console log first time, save, and over to the browser, we see this value of undefined. As mentioned before, this is another primitive type such as string, number, and boolean, and this undefined is displayed because we have a variable which doesn't have a value assigned to it. This was like earlier when we looked at $0 inside the browser. If we initially type in $0 when we don't have any elements selected on the page, we get back the value of undefined. The final data type which we're going to look at in this video is also a primitive, and this is the value of null. Null also indicates that something is missing too. So if we set our variable of player name to be equal to null, and then refresh the browser, as expected we get back this value of null. We had a brief look at object in an earlier video, and null is related to these objects. It indicates that this object is empty, and often when working with databases or backend services, a common example of this is when requesting some user data. If the user is logged in, we get back an object containing all of that user's information. If they are not logged in, however, we will often see null since the user object will be empty. Okay, so we've looked at 3 different data types in this video. We've looked at Boolean to begin with, which is a simple true or false value. This primitive data type is really useful and often seen combined with an if statement. We have undefined, again a primitive data type which indicates that something is missing. In our example, we took a look at a variable which has no value assigned to it. Finally, we also discovered null, which is again a primitive data type, and it's more specific than undefined, and it refers to an object which is absent of any values. And you can see at the bottom here that undefined is a more generic result, and null is more specific to an object.